goes live. It is not the smartest guys in the room. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. How you doing this morning, Dom?
All right, it's good. I hear you. You sound lovely as always.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay.
As do you. As do you.
I'm trying, man. I didn't even have time to comb my hair today. I was in, you know why? For anybody that's watching, today I was in flow. And so there's a point where I was doing some writing and got into a flow, and everything else had to be tossed to the side at that point when that happens. You get it?
Yeah, no, I sometimes I feel like I'm not sure if if it's flow or I get hyper fixated on things. Because I'll end up like it's not weird for me to get so locked in and focused on like completing one thing that like I'll just totally like miss meals and like lose hours of my day. And then the next thing I know, it's like, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And like, Becky will text me and, be like, what are you up to or whatever? And I'll tell her, and then she'll be like, did you eat? Have you like, how long have you been sitting at your desk? Or how long have you been focused on this thing? So yeah, so I don't know. I've always kind of been a little bit confused on like flow state versus like hyperfixation for me personally, right? Like I'm not sure which one I'm doing most of the time, but I had that happen on Monday. I was in this thing. I was creating basically a spreadsheet product to use for my business, to help with the sales team that I'm starting to build out, to create sort of some calculators and some things so that they can better understand and better create, sort of approximate pricing for folks and, stuff like that, drawing up estimates. I got deep into spreadsheets, man. And I was like, I am smart enough to figure this out. And I literally spent like 4 hours just staring at this spreadsheet, which I eventually got to work. So I'm proud of myself. But I don't know if that was flow state or if I was just like overly fixated on something, maybe in kind of a slightly unhealthy way.
Yeah, if you're going into spreadsheets, I would have to think that is the opposite of flow, but you got it done, and that's what counts.
Well, but what if like, so I have a friend who runs a bookkeeping business, right? She like lives and breathes by sort of spreadsheets and that kind of software. Like for her, that totally could be. Right.
My wife's an accountant and loves numbers. I mean, just would dig in all day long to find like pennies in our checkbook and things like that. I mean, so I hear you.
That is, that's their flow state. I mean, here's where I would argue that like maybe it could qualify as flow state, and maybe I'm just trying to like paint this with a better brush, right? Than what it actually was, which was me just getting obsessed with something and like not giving up until I had figured it out. But my favorite thing, and I've always said this, I've said this for a long time, actually, I should say, rather than always said this, but I've said this for a long time. My favorite thing about what I do is the creative problem solving aspect, right? Like that's what I really love. That's what I get excited about. That's what really kind of gets me going is creative problem solving, like figuring out how to sort of crack this, kind of like amorphous, hard to pin down kind of problem, right? And that's sort of what I was kind of dealing with. I feel like I was in like problem solving mode with that spreadsheet, and I like was having to try to figure out a novel way to create this sort of estimating calculator that like took a whole bunch of variables into account and like spit out a number at you. And I finally figured out how to do it. But it took a while, but I finally figured out how to do it. But I think that's what it was for me, it was the problem solving thing. And I was like, I know I can figure this out. I can do this. So that's like, I don't know, maybe that's my flow state.
You could be in that. That's a good. Well, think about it. Everybody, think about your flow states. Where's that time of the day you're the happiest and you're most productive? But today we're going to talk about making your story memorable, telling your story, making it memorable. So I wanted to propose to you, and just in this thought process, I wanted you to think about a time where your mother or father, you had fallen down, you had failed at something, where your mother or dad picked you up. And just for a second, whoever, think about that. Like, is there a time mom and dad picked you up and how that made you feel? And then is it years later? Is it 20 years later? Where do you take that? What did it mean to you? So I wonder about that. No, so where I'm going to start this story, Tom, and making your story memorable is, I think me and you are both in the same world here, where it's about how it makes you feel. It's not about me. So many people, blah, 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 blah. They tell all these stories, all these facts, all these figures, all their accomplishments, but those could be cool. But how does it make you feel? How is it about them? How can they connect with it? So I'll start you with that. And that's what we're going to get into. How do we make the story memorable?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where, and we were just talking briefly, kind of before we started the show, right? As we often do. I mean, I think, you're 100% right that, like in talking about that, trying to get people to think about that time when, they failed at something, or they had fallen down, and their parents, kind of picked them up and encouraged them to keep moving forward. Or somebody else in their life did, right? Whoever, right? A time when someone encouraged you to push forward, even when it seemed like you were facing an insurmountable, obstacle. And I think you're 100% right. What you're getting at there, if I'm correct, is that ultimately what makes stories memorable is our ability to empathize with them, to connect with them emotionally, right? To identify with the characters in the story on an emotional level. It's those emotions that create those memories for us, and make stories something that we can go back to over and over again, right? And something we can remember for a long time. It's the reason why there are moments in all of our lives that stand out, even though they're part of our own story, they're part of our lived experience. Those stories stand out because of the emotions that they're tied to. And so I would argue the number one most important key component, top of the list, without a question in my mind, is if you want to make your stories memorable for your audience, the most important thing you can do, what you have to do, is to give your audience the opportunity to connect with your stories emotionally, to relate with them, to empathize with the characters in your story. That's how you make them memorable. You make them memorable by tying emotional reactions to them, right? Not with information, right? Not with facts, right? But with emotions. That's how you make things memorable. That's how you make a story stick, I think.
That's pretty good, Tom. Well, we have some expert storytellers right here. And if anybody wants to, John Jay, Brand P. Swift, Julie Loken, Dr. Tachi up on the stage here with us. If anybody wants to comment on LinkedIn or ask a question about how to make this story memorable. But John is on radio, hears from some of the best storytellers in the world, and he's a great storyteller. So, John, is there something that stands out or connects all these great stories that makes them memorable?
Yeah. And what it is know your audience, who is going to more than likely be perceiving that. So the very first thing we want to do is establish uh, relatable content, who your audience is. And one of the best things we can use, and because not everybody's going to experience the exact same thing, one of the best things we can use, and politicians do this phenomenally, is fear. They create fear of a certain thing that's not happening yet, and they're the solution. So when you have a topic, I'm going to use Brian Swift as an example. He's such a great storyteller, and he's got such a memorable story. But when your vast majority of your audience has not gone through what Brian's gone through, they can connect when you focus on the fear. What if that happened to you? What if that happened to your child? How would you react? How would you respond? And you don't say, now imagine this. You can. What you do is you start telling a story from the perspective of them, assuming they're going to get the fear right away. And the more polished you get, the better you'll get at delivering your story. But use fear, use the relatable content to get started, and you'll grow really, really rapidly.
John, an interesting take, man. I loved where you went with it. Relatable, knowing the audience, good stuff, man. What do you think, Tom?
I mean, so obviously fear is an emotion, right? So like 100% makes sense what John's saying. My pushback would be, don't rely on fear, right? I mean, so what happens and what politicians are doing when he talks about politicians, or we see this a lot in sort of like in, clickbaity, media, right? What's happening is they're playing on negativity bias, right? And negativity bias is our propensity as human beings to pay attention to things that are scary or dangerous, right? More often than we pay attention to things that aren't, right? It's a survival instinct essentially, right? So basically, like when we're talking about, when we hit on like the emotion of fear, we're playing to that negativity bias. And my thinking is that while it's easier to trigger negativity bias and to play to that negativity bias than it is to create positive emotional reaction and positive emotional ties with people, right? It's easier to do that. I don't think it's better. And I think we've got enough we've got enough things in the world that prey on that negativity bias that trigger fear, right? Or rely
Why is it got to be negative, Tom?
That's a good point.
Why is it negative and clickbaitiness? See, that's an opinion based off not the whole story.
Okay, so fear could be a scary movie. My daughter watches these horror films, and like the other day, they were out at a cabin, and it's the new whatever coming out, and they're out of the cabin, so I could see how, in that sense, a fear. So I get you. It isn't all negativity on the fear. So gotcha. Go on, Tom. Do you want to rebut that?
I mean, look, I didn't make up the term negativity bias, right? Like that's not my term, right? That is a term in psychology that social psychologists use to describe this behavior, right? So I didn't create the term. What I'm saying is that's what things like clickbait prey on, right? Is they prey. I was using it as an example. I was saying that's how it works. That's what they're doing, is they're triggering this cognitive bias that is commonly referred to by social psychologists as negativity bias, right? That's the description of it. So just to be clear, what I'm saying is fear falls into the category of, or a cognitive bias called negativity bias, right? When you use fear as to create attention for content, you are relying on negativity bias to garner that attention. That's what I'm saying. And I just think there's other ways to go about it. Personally, for me, I would rather create different kinds of emotional connections around my content rather than fear.
But I wonder, Tom, in all your productions, I would bet some of them are fear-based productions or something like that. Like let's say you did a game show. Like I think you film a show where people, I don't know what happens on the show that you do like once a year, but like if people are high up on Amazing Race and they cross a bridge, is that fear one of those emotions, or parachuting or whatever?
I mean, yeah, kind of, but I mean, I've never done content like that per se. But I mean, not really. We're kind of getting off the, I mean,
Yeah. I just wanted to. I was going to John here because the emotion of fear isn't. There is a lot of negativity, but some of fear is, it's a wide, a wide emotion. So, hey, John, you want to touch on that again, and then we'll go to Brian.
Fear is what, and that's one of the things we use. So, fear is a natural human emotion, and it's relatable. Grandparents have different fears than parents do. Aunts and uncles have different parent fears than children do. So when we talk about fear, that's a way of getting their attention immediately. It doesn't mean you go to negative. It's saying this is what happened in my story, and then you progress into the beautiful parts of it, the inspirational parts of it. That's what I really focus on is not facts, not statements. I do this, I do that. What you do is of little consequence. What you've been through is far more important for what I do and for getting people's attention, both in radio and podcasting. And from there, we can get them to listen to our message. If we start with the message first, this is what I do, it's going to be a tough haul.
Yeah. John, thank you, brother. We're going to continue on this. Mr. Swift, you are up. No politics, or you're muting, and I still love you, but any politics, and I'm moving you down off the stage. So go on, man. What do you got? On how to make the story memorable. Go on.
Don't start by threatening me.
Sorry, man. I know.
Don't get me get up.
All right. Go on.
Don't be afraid of politics. So I got a comment on fear. Fear does not have to be negative. Let me just ask you something, Dom. You're a competitive man, right?
100%. Still mad about stuff from third grade. Go on.
Okay. And you're mad because you're competitive because you're afraid of losing. Right?
Yeah, I'm not doing my best. Could have gave more, leaving some on the table. Yeah.
That fear is not negative. Fear is a great emotion that drives people. I mean, fear, if it wasn't for fear, I wouldn't have accomplished half the things that I've done, in all honesty. And I think a lot of competitive people use fear as a positive way to drive themselves, because you cannot have positivity without fear.
So Swift, how do you make a story memorable? You're good at telling a story. One thing about Brian, like John said, Brian can tell his story in 30 seconds. He can tell it in a minute. He can do it in a half hour, an hour. Tells it a lot of different ways. And it is very memorable. How do you do it, Brian?
367.
All right, Tom. Tom, say that one more time for me.
Okay, Brian's doing algebra in the background. We hear you. I said, so you're good at telling your story in 30 seconds, a minute, 20 minutes. I've seen you do it for an hour. How do you make that story memorable when you only get that quick shot? How do you make it memorable?
I agree with what everybody said. I think you tap into emotions. I think, and I don't know, I've seen people tell stories that some people think are great, and I think they're okay, because of lack of being authentic. I think you have to be authentic, and I think people could tell when you're telling a story to get people's attention or to supercharge a story, and when you're being authentic. And I think you have to add to what Tom said, to what John said, to what you said. I think you have to have, it's got to be authentic. And I think people know that. I think there's something inside of us that can read the authenticity in somebody's story. And I think that's also a component of a good story.
Right on, Mr. Swift. I have in my notes here today, I wrote what's unique about it. So what makes your story different than everybody else's? Why should I listen to you? Now I'll tell the room. The other day I was on a call and a gentleman told a story about the characters in Shawshank Redemption. He broke down Red, he broke down books, and he broke down Andy Dufresne, and was basically saying these are three different types of characters and why they are different, and how we each as people are one of those characters at different times in our life. Well done, man. The guy really killed it, and it was captivating. So why was this story? Why was a story like that so interesting to me, Tom? What do you say to something like that? Because it wasn't about him. He just was able to connect these characters to us, I guess.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to say without having heard that and kind of knowing exactly what you're talking about. But I mean, my guess would be that you found it interesting because you already had an emotional connection to the story of Shawshank Redemption, right? Which is sort of a classic redemption story. It's a hero's journey story, right? That kind of follows a lot of the sort of classic storytelling structures. It's a fantastic film too. It's beautifully acted. It's very well written. So that would be my guess. My guess is that resonated with you because you already had an emotional connection to the film. You already were sort of emotionally invested in what he was talking about before he even started talking about it, because you had a positive emotional reaction to the film, whether it made you cry or it made you laugh or did both, right? You had a positive emotional memories of your experience with that film and relating to the characters in that film, right? Imagining yourself in their shoes, or what would happen if something, similar transpired in your life, right? Something bad happened that you had to overcome, whatever the case may be, right? That's why the hero's journey sort of structure works so well, right? Because we can all relate to being thrust into circumstances beyond our control, that we have to then adapt to and overcome in order to succeed and come out the other side, right? Facing challenges in life. It's universal. Every person faces challenges in their lives, right? So the challenges are different for everybody, but everyone faces challenges. And I think that's why stories like Shawshank work. And I think it's also probably why you liked his take on it so much, right? Is because it brought back all of those emotions that you had tied to that story in that film when you watched it. That's my guess, without knowing exactly what that thing. Although now I'm kind of curious to see that.
Well, that's interesting, and you touch on every emotion that the characters touch on every emotion. If we are those people at different times in our life, if we're Andy Dufresne trying to get out of something, if we're Brooks and we're lost, if we're Red and we're on the inside, the outside, whatever that may be. Interesting. I like your spin on it, Tom. And what a good movie. Has anybody here not seen Shawshank Redemption? That's what I want to know. If you haven't
Me.
seen, are you kidding me, Julie Loken? Come on now. Okay.
I don't know why I've never seen it, to be honest.
You need to have a like popcorn session this weekend. And okay, Carrie Brett, come on up, Carrie Brett. Okay, we are going to continue here, Tom. And just so happens we're going to talk to Julie Loken too. No, I want to do Julie. Hold on. I want to read from the comments what Yvonne said. She said, well, she has to go somewhere else, but her comment was a good comment. She says, fear can be useful as long as you can acknowledge it and move through it. As far as storytelling goes, I think you can talk about what your audience is fearful of as long as you offer a solution. I think it can get manipulative if you suggest that you are the only solution. Well said. So well done, Yvonne, and thanks for probably straightening us out a little bit. So good job. Julie Loken. Yeah. We are to Julie Loken. Julie Loken, how do you make a story memorable? Are there things when you're working with clients, when you're getting ready for them to take the stage, do you give them a final few tips or something like that so they go out and kill it?
Thanks, Dom and Tom. Amazing. And just like dabbling on just touching upon the topic of fear. What's our greatest motivator? Fear. Fear of being poor, fear of being unwanted, fear of not being loved, fear of not being obese. These things motivate us, and it's about how to nuance it into your storytelling, your pitch. I feel that when I connect the best with people is when I can share a similar story with them, even if it's a fear of getting on stage. And we know a lot of people have a huge fear of speaking publicly. if I could connect with them, tell them my horrendous story, and they see I can do it, then that will motivate them and give them a sense of comfort. It is eliciting emotions and bonding with your audience. And what are we all trying to do? Dom, Tom, John, Brian, Dr. Tachi, Debbie, Carrie, what are we trying to do? We are trying to figure out the biggest pain point for our potential clients, our potential audience, and connect with them. What keeps them up at night? Where are they? When are they slouched in the kitchen in the middle of the night by the glow of the refrigerator down, just thinking about why they are not where they're supposed to be and tapping into that? It could sound manipulative, but that's how we help people. Thank you. I land my plane. And you can do hard things. We can do hard things. Right, Carrie?
There you go. Well done, Julie Loken. We appreciate you. Go on, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I mean, I think I think fear is, I was just going to say this popped into my head as Julie was talking about fear as a motivator. I think fear is really good for short-term action or immediate action, but it's not great for long-term motivation. Right. And what I mean by that is, like, you think about, sorry, do you want to say something to clarify,
Oh,
Julie?
I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, cool.
Let's think about, and Brian, take your headsets off. Don't listen to this. Like, if we think about Donald Trump, how did he become president? Because he wanted to get elected, and I believe he knew the fears of a certain demographic and went for it. But you either get over it or you don't. So that was just and I don't expect Brian to.
All right, go on. We're not going down that rabbit hole of politics.
Yeah. We're not going to turn this into a political debate. So we'll just leave that where it is, but let that sit. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good for short-term action. It's good for a motivator. You think about something like the fight or flight response, right, that we have, that I'm sure all of us here have heard of before, right? You've heard of fight or flight. You get thrown into a scary, dangerous situation, and it triggers that response, that autonomic response, and you either get your fists ready to fly, or you turn around and run. Right? It motivates you to quick action, right? But once you're clear of the immediate danger, right? Once the immediate danger is gone, you don't just keep running. Right? Like, if it triggers flight and you start running, as soon as you get away from the dangerous thing, you don't just keep running forever. Right? It doesn't motivate you long term. So it's good for short term action, but not good for long term motivation. So I wanted to add that. And now, with that said, we're hitting 10 o'clock, so we're trying to stick to our schedule here. I just want to take a minute to say thank you to everybody for being here. Appreciate all of you guys being here, participating, asking questions, being a part of the conversation. To anybody watching us on the internet, we appreciate you too and love you as well. Feel free, please do jump into the chat on LinkedIn, throw a question there. We're always happy to answer when we can. Although we're just so far on the chats, we're just getting we got a unsolicited promotional opportunity on Twitch coming in. Thanks, but hard pass on that. But yeah, if you're anywhere else, if you want to throw a question in the chat, we'll be happy to address it, talk about it, get you into the conversation. But yeah, I just wanted to take a second and say thanks for being part of Not the Smartest Guys in the Room. That's the whole idea, is we don't want to be the smartest guys in the room. So with that said, I think
hold on.
Go ahead, Dom. Go ahead, Dom.
Sorry, man. I'm going to go down this route. Let's talk like Tony Robbins, Burn the Boats. Tony Robbins has this pain versus pleasure, where he believes every decision a person makes is based on pain or pleasure. That there's either avoiding this or the pleasure. I want these French fries because they are so good and they're going to make me happy. I don't want these French fries because I'm worried I'm going to have a few extra pounds on me. And so, in each person, it deals with pain or pleasure with everything. So I wonder is that very similar in the as the fear verb? Is it the same as fear verse? So John Jay, what do you think about that? Pain versus pleasure, is it the same kind of thing?
Well, it's, in my opinion, it's two sides of the same coin. And yes, our ultimate decisions are one or the other, and what we think to be pleasurable sometimes winds up being painful and not what we expect. But I don't engage in that too much from what I do, the storytelling aspect of it. But I do agree with him to an extent. And some of the best lessons I learned, I'll close on this, I learned from the same people, and those are what to do and what not to do.
Good point, man. Yeah. Sometimes I have some mentors around my children, and some, I don't know, examples around my children. Some are examples of how to live a great life. Some are examples of how probably if you do things wrong, this is what will happen. And both they will learn from. Go on, Tom.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, just kind of to your to that question, right? I think all my response to like that sort of supposition that every decision is either, you know, pain or pleasure. I always try to not create sort of what I think to be sort of false dichotomies, right? Like every decision, where I would agree with that is every decision has consequences, right? Every decision we make has consequences. Some consequences are positive, some consequences are negative, right? Pleasure or pain. But those consequences exist on a spectrum, right? They are not either positive or negative 100%, right? They are like they live on a sliding scale, right? And so while it makes it easy to create like to create a kind of a saying around it, right? Or to deliver like a message around that. I think it's important to remember that there's, you know, we live in a world with nuance, right? And that it's important to acknowledge that while all decisions have consequences, the where we kind of live in the real world is on a sliding scale, right? It's on a spectrum. It's not either good or bad, yes or no. It's yes to this part of it, no to that part of it. You know, this is good, this is bad, this might be neutral, right? So it all kind of exists on a spectrum. I try not to put things in like either or buckets, right? Like I don't like kind of drawing those lines because I don't know. It just I feel like it makes it easy to paint with too broad a brush. That's my thought. But we've gotten a little bit off the plot here, and I want to try to get us back on. I was hoping maybe our friend, she's next in my queue anyway, Dr. Tachi. Was hoping maybe Dr. Tachi could get us back on track talking about what she thinks makes stories memorable.
That's a lot of pressure, Tom. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. I would do two things. So I would just say, to the point that many of you were making, that showing that you are like your audience, that there are aspects of you and your stories that are like your audience, is huge in making it memorable, because I think that people relate to people that have had similar experiences. So even if the experience itself is not similar, the sentiment that these things have happened to people, or these things can happen to you, or these things have happened in general, can draw people in. So I think showing people that your humanness, that's what it is. Showing your humanness, even if you are this great figure, this great ominous figure, you've done a lot of great things, you have a lot of money, etc. And somehow you are assumed to be on a higher plane than the people that you're speaking to. Showing your humanness, I think, does a lot in terms of good storytelling, but then drawing people in because you're like them. I think this is why people gravitated so much. If you remember, during the pandemic, nobody could go anywhere. Well, I know you remember that. That's not tomorrow, but it's people couldn't go anywhere. Celebrities could not work. You know, if you're an actor, you weren't working. But what you could do is get on an Instagram live or a Facebook live or YouTube and connect with your audience. And just getting on a tool that they can use to getting on a tool and speaking to them and talking about experiences and things that are happening, that shows the humanness. So I think that's one really good way to connect and draw that in storytelling. And there was another thing that I was going to say about when you brought up the whole pain versus pleasure thing. This is interesting because I was still taking like a kind of mastermind class, and the leader of the group said something to this effect, and it's, you know, geared towards sales, that you will draw people in more when you're offering to solve a pain point than offering them pleasure. So if you are offering somebody something in an open container, which where we were always taught not to do, like in Nigeria, my father would always be like, don't take something if it's an open container. So you won't do that. But in a different situation, from a stranger, if you that thing, that water that's in an open container, if you needed it because you were really dying of thirst, or because you were in a desert and there was no other water, or you needed it to wash off a wound, you would take it because you needed that water to solve the pain thing. So you can draw people in, especially in sales, to solve a pain point, but they wouldn't take that same advice for pleasure, if that makes sense. So I found that interesting. That's my time, ladies and gentlemen.
Right on, Dr. Tachi. We appreciate you breaking it in. Pain versus pleasure keeps coming up. The fear keeps coming up. So we'll continue down that path too, but also humanizing yourself. And I wonder, Dr. Tachi, how does somebody so famous like yourself, so famous, so beautiful, how do you humanize yourself to the regular folk like us?
Well, thank you for saying that. This is the thing. I'm silly. So I think the fact that I'm silly and that I like to have fun humanizes me. Not that I'm big and ominous, as you said, or so famous, but I think that you can't help but find me human when I'm very silly and I like to have a lot of fun, because that's what normal people do. That's what I think anyway.
That's a good answer. Good job, Dr. Tachi. All right, we are rolling on. Tom, we got another story. We got a bunch of storytellers here, so we will, at this point, we'll go through them, and then we got a show and tell coming here shortly, so keep us on track. So, Debbie, when you're telling memorable stories, I see you on stages. I saw you pitching. I read a beautiful book by you, beautiful chapters in other books. How do you tell a memorable story, Debbie?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Dom. You know, I think it goes back to what others have been saying. You've got to be vulnerable, and you've got to allow people to see the pain that you went through, and find that connection. And that's all part of not only telling the story, but it's all in the character development and the structuring the challenges the characters are going through, and getting them to move through whatever pain point that they're going to. But it all boils down to making your characters likable, relatable, and showing their vulnerabilities, and also showing how they work through some of those challenges, because I think at the end of the day everybody can kind of relate to some aspect of the different characters, but they're also looking for hope to get through their whatever situation they may be going through at that time. So I will land my plane.
I think that's a great point, Debbie, that idea of vulnerability. I think it's incredibly important whenever you're trying to communicate with an audience, that you really present yourself as a full person, right? As you said, Don, that you humanize yourself, right? But you present yourself authentically as a full person, right? with flaws and all. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of folks struggle with, particularly in any sort of public forum or on the internet, right, via social media. A lot of folks struggle with presenting themselves as a full person with flaws, that makes mistakes, because of fear of judgment from other people, and fear of how they'll be received by other people. But at the end of the day, it's that presentation with blemishes, right? That vulnerability that gives people the opportunity to connect with us, right? That gives people the opportunity to see themselves in others, right? To relate to and empathize with other people. So I think that was an incredibly important point, Debbie. I appreciate you bringing that up. What do you think, Dom?
I love the topic of vulnerability. People that strip down the walls and don't always try to be perfect every time. Like me and you talked about somebody one day that they try to have this image where they're a millionaire 10 times over. They've never failed at anything. They're 100% successful. They look a certain way. They act a certain way. It's a bore. I mean, what a lame story, man. Sure, I would sure love to know how they got there, how the struggles, how some behind the scenes of when they're not that character that they made up, So vulnerability. Good point, Debbie. What it's interesting when we break this down, we can break it down almost to simple words, like humanizing, vulnerability. So go on, Tom. Okay, where are we going? We going show and tell, or are we going to Carrie and Jason next? What's up?
Now we got to get to Carrie and Jason quick. We got show and tell. Maybe we'll get to Carrie. We'll do show and tell. Come back to Jason, and then we'll wrap it up.
And Jimmy's got his hand raised. Try to bring him up. I tried to bring him up. So that's my dear friend Jim Ajay. He's a VIP, but he might say something completely senseless. You never know about him. Okay, so Carrie, interesting. You tell stories via photograph a lot of time. Now she does have a podcast, but you're making stories memorable a lot of different ways. So do tell how you make a story memorable, Carrie.
Okay. I mean, when you throw in the photography piece, that's a whole another skill set that's a little different because oftentimes I don't show the pain unless I have to show the pain for the story. But I think pain is like probably the biggest motivator for sure with my show because I talk about heartbreak and how do we avoid heartbreak. And when you dance with love, most of the time you're going to experience loss or heartbreak. And so my show would be pretty depressing if I just talked about fear and pain. But I do cover very hard stories, difficult things. Yesterday I interviewed Dr. Nadine Macaluso, nice Sicilian name there that I had to practice, who was the ex-wife of the Wolf of Wall Street. And she wrote a book called Run Like Hell. And when the FBI got him, she took her 2 kids and she opened that door and ran like hell. And that's just so incredibly powerful to me. I mean, talk about pain. So we talked about we had to go and talk about very difficult things, like how he would say to her, "The only way you're getting out of this is in a body bag." I mean, things that would take your breath away, but things that are happening in this country all day long. So important material, but we had some real laughs during the episode as well, and I think that's how I got through it, honestly, because it's heavy material, but I think it's important to talk about. So all those peaks and valleys and knowing your subject and doing the research to bring that story to light, I think all has to happen in photography and when I podcast. So I am done speaking. And like Julie said, we can do hard things like Glennon Doyle.
Thank you, Carrie, and keep bringing those stories to life. And one of the things that's interesting is whether you're a photographer, whether you're writing books, whether you're a podcaster, doing videos, it is all storytelling, and there's ways to make them all memorable. So, Tom, I think it's that time of the show. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's time for a little show and tell action.
Okay, we need to switch it up here. Little show and tell action. I got it right below me. Okay, let's see here. I got a bag below me. Okay, you ready for this? So I found a new hobby. I have tried it before, but last night, me and my wife started this hobby, and we're in. We went together. We drove across town to one location. We couldn't do what we wanted to do there, so we drove across to another location, and we found a community of nice people. The hobby is pickleball. And these are my pickleball paddles. I bought her a paddle I bought this one off of Jim Hodges' dad, and I bought this one for my wife because I thought I had bought her one for Christmas, but it turns out I didn't buy the one at Christmas. So I kept looking around the house for her paddle, and I didn't have it. So I went out recently and got my pickleball supplies. So I now have a whole bag of pickleball supplies. I put a nail in my garage, and I'm going to hang my pickleball supplies. And I think that is something that me and my wife will be able to do together. And the community embraced us. They helped us. It was a lot of fun. And I feel a little fitter today. So my pickleball supplies, Tom.
Nice. I think most importantly, was it fun?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Good. I mean, yeah, I think I still don't even really know. And this is not, I'm not asking to have it explained. I can easily look it up. I just haven't gotten around to it. I still don't exactly know what pickleball is. I know it's like a variation of sort of tennis, but played like you can play it on a tennis court, but you do it slightly differently, and you play with different, and played in pairs typically, right? Like, so I understand it a little bit, but it's basically tennis, but you don't have to run around as much, right? So it's a little bit
almost. I almost want to say very similar to ping pong, where your motions are ping pong-esque, and the ball has a flight ability that makes it go a little farther. So and it is a smaller court and stuff. So I think what they say is you can take it to whatever level you want.
Right. But it's approachable for like kind of people of all,
yes.
Sort of fitness levels, right? Whereas
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like even for people, if you have like mobility issues, tennis is kind of like out of the realm, but pickleball is a little bit more approachable because it's a smaller space. You don't have to move very much, so on and so forth. But I've heard a lot of people say it's a lot of fun. I've never played, but yeah, it sounds like fun, and that's cool that it's something that you and your wife can do together. Yeah, that's cool. Like Becky and I run together, like we do races together and stuff like that. And it's nice to have, sort of a common activity that we can do together that we both enjoy, and that we have friends around and sort of a community around. We have a big group of friends around running, and some of us will go to like destination races together, in different states and things like that, and make it into like a little weekend, trip with friends. So yeah, I totally get it. I think that's great. That's awesome. You guys found something. I'm glad you had some fun. Now I want to see you play pickleball.
Okay. I'm going to get better at it. I enjoyed it. And I'll give you my relationship motivation for today, that I got married in 2001. So I'm going on, this weekend is my anniversary. Now, we did go on a cruise. So so 2001 to 2024, that's 23 years. And I love my beautiful wife. My answer here and what I want to share with the group is you can either grow together or grow apart. There's 1,000 things going on in everybody's life. There's kids, there's work, there's jobs, there's activity, there's illness, there's sickness, there's a million different things. If you can find more activities to do together, more reasons to be part of each other's life, maybe today this little pickleball and these funny looking paddles will help me get another 23 years. So on that note, let's keep rolling. Tom, not the smartest guys in the room. We are talking making stories memorable. Jason, man, how can you make a story memorable? Are there any basic tip to making a story memorable?
A lot of people have talked about pain. I talk about put people on a journey like an adventure, whether it's sad, exciting, or not. You have to stimulate people in their mind in a story that they're looking for an answer. Like when you read a book, every chapter has something that builds towards the end. And as long as the storyteller is moving you where that journey / adventure is, then you've got something that stays memorable. Like if the most memorable book I've ever read in my whole life was The Alchemist by Pablo Coelho. Why? Because we all go on a journey of immaturity to maturity and value. So to really keep it on time, I'm just going to say it's not the pains, it's not the pleasures, it's the journey of the adventure where the reward in the end really gives a mental pivot saying, I can now reference this. I remember this thing in the story. So I'll just end there and keep it quick.
Jason's right on, man. I held up The Alchemist while you were talking. Jason talked about The Alchemist a lot. I read The Alchemist based on Jason's recommendation. Absolutely loved it, and it is a journey. In my notes here today, one of the things I had
read it 2 more times and see what you find too. That's an interesting book to touch on.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I had What's the Win? And then you take in that book, they take you on a journey and then you get the win. What is the win? So not the smartest guys in the room. It's that time, Tom. It's time. You bring it home. You got a tough one today, man. Go on, my friend.
Well, I think Jason actually just inspired something. So there's inspired me to share something here in the wrap up. That's actually pretty that's a pretty common sort of metaphor that I use to help people understand story structure and storytelling, right? So Jason's absolutely right that, a good story should take the audience on a journey, right? There should be emotional ups and downs, right? On that journey, that you should hit various emotions, not just one or the other, right? Not just positive or negative, not just pain or pleasure, that you should hit multiple emotions to create those touch points to help round out those characters so they present as whole human beings, right? And so the metaphor that I like to use to help people kind of understand what I'm talking about when I talk about story structure is a roller coaster, right? So a roller coaster, everybody's kind of familiar with the typical roller coaster, right? So when you get on a roller coaster, you sit down in the car, you get either the shoulder straps go down or the lap belt goes down, and you pull out of the boarding area and you start going up that first climb, right? And that is sort of the introduction to the early part of the story where you're just kind of giving everybody the information they need, right? Basically, in literal terms, the going up that incline is giving the roller coaster car the potential energy it needs to make it through the track, right? By getting up to the top of that hill, it's giving you the potential energy you need to go fast enough to make it through the track. And similarly, the beginning of the story is giving the audience the information they need, the context they need for the rest of the story to make sense, right? And to be impactful. Then once you crest that hill and you start down the other side, right, you're going to move through a bunch of twists and turns and ups and downs, maybe even some loops, depending on the kind of roller coaster you're on, right? But there's a variety of a variety of things that the roller coaster does during your ride, during that story, right? There are ups and downs, right? There are times when you're excited and times when you're a little bit scared, right? There are times when you're happy and times when you wish it was just over, right? It takes you on a journey, right? And good stories should do the same. They should take you on an emotional ride, right? It shouldn't be all extreme ups and downs. There should be little ups and downs and big ups and downs and little ups and downs and big ups and downs. And then after you've gone through that whole track, right? You've gone through the twists and turns, you've gone through the ups and downs, right? You've done a loop or two. Then at the end of that ride, what happens? But the roller coaster pulls back into that boarding area, comes to a halt, the belts release, and you climb out. It comes to a resolution, right? A satisfying resolution, right? And so that doesn't necessarily mean a happy ending, because not all stories have happy endings, and that's okay. But it comes to a satisfying resolution, right? You may not be glad that you rode the roller coaster at the end of the day when you get off. You might not be glad that you did it, right? But you're satisfied with the resolution that you got off safe and sound, right? So that's the important thing to remember. So when I talk about story, when I talk about story structure, when I talk about what makes stories memorable, to me, it's the emotional components to stories that make them memorable. And the best way to create good emotional touch points and opportunities for connection for your audience is to take them on a ride or a journey, as Jason said, is to take them on a ride, bring them up to the top of that first hill, give them all the information they need, give them the context that they need to understand the story, and then go down the other side through the twists, through the turns, through the ups and downs, and make sure you bring your story to a satisfactory conclusion for the audience. And I think if you do all of that, you'll tell a memorable story. So that's what I got for everybody this week. Thanks so much for being here with us. Thanks to Dom, my unwavering co-host. Appreciate you, buddy. Thanks to everybody who's here in the audience with us here on Clubhouse, participating in the conversation, watching us anywhere and everywhere on the internet. To all you pickleballers out there, have fun next time you're on the court. And we will see you guys next Wednesday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, right here on Not the Smartest Guys in the Room. We appreciate you. We love you. We thank you. And we hope you have a great rest of the week and good weekend. And we will see you soon. Bye-bye. Love you guys.